Hello everyone. First of all, let me apologize that I could not take your whole class today because of network disruptions. We had started talking about Old English period and had gone to Middle English period, but then this network issue started and I had to stop the class. What I'm planning to do is I will restart the class next Saturday. This time we will be starting from the Renaissance, the Elizabethan age and going on. Now I'm making this video as a sort of brief synopsis of what I had said in that live, and I will be uploading it so that you can just go through this video and be prepared for our next class. So what we have discussed is that England was a place of individual tribes, and these tribes, they were always fighting with each other in the earliest of times. Angles, Saxons and Jutes, the three tribes had come to England and started to have a grip on the whole of the nation. So much that eventually this age came to be known as the Anglo-Saxon Age. Now, what kind of life did these Anglo-Saxons lead? They were mostly seafaring people. Okay, so they were more comfortable on the ocean, and in their poetry, in their literature, we find these nostalgia for sea life. Okay, this romantic fascination for nature, and we also see a faith in what they used to call WYRD, weird or fate. That word is linked to the word weird, which we find later in works like Macbeth. Now, this belief in fate and this fascination for nature, that gave rise to literary outputs like Beowulf, which is the first English epic, which is available now. We don't know if there were other epics because most of them got lost in the way. These literary productions of Old English period, they were not written down by anybody. These were parts of oral traditions. Okay, so these were, you can say, transferred through generations of people, and eventually these fables, these stories, these poems were written down by Christian clerics who used to control this whole writing process. A very significant thing happened during the Old English period, that is the arrival of St. Augustine, who brought in with him Christianity to England. People were Christianized, they started to have a connection with the continent, its religious ethos. And these Christian clerics, the workers who wrote in the churches, they started to write down these existing oral fables. And while writing down, these Christian clerics, they used to dilute it with their own belief, their own faith system, and their own way of looking at life. Therefore, we have Christian elements in Old English literature, not because the Old English people were, Christian in sentiment, but because they were written down by people who had Christian sentiments. When we look at the literature of Old English, we primarily focus on Beowulf, and on the other hand we have heroic poetry, and then elegies. Deor's Lament is a very, very important elegy. But most importantly, what we find are two schools of poetry which were essentially Christian schools of poetry, one under Caedmon and the other under Kinwolf. Caedmon was an uneducated person, illiterate person who used to work in a church. And one fine day he got up and he started to sing in poetry, in musical poetry, and it was lyrical poetry. And he became extremely famous, and he started to sing about the biblical stories. All Christian elements were there in his words. His followers came to be called Kinwolfian, and we have another school which was more educated, erudite, more classy, and that was the Kinwolfian School, or Synopsis School, whatever you want to pronounce it as. So we have these two schools. The poems belonging to the Kinwolfian School, they were simple poems comparatively, whereas Kinwolfian School of poetry represents a more refined sort of poetry, where we have complex images and a lot of influence from classical learning. Okay, so moving on to the medieval period, I had talked about a very important date, that is 1066 AD. In 1066 AD, we have this event called the Norman Conquest. Why is Norman Conquest so important? Because this brought the people of England into very close contact with the people of France. And the French, they started to dominate everything that was part of England. They not only dominated the politics of England, they dominated the culture of England, the language of England, the food habits, the dress, and everything. Okay, you know about this from, if you have studied philology and you have seen the French influence. So this was an all pervasive influence, and it is reflected so much in literature. Earlier in Old English period, we have alliterative verse, where alliteration was a very important aspect. It gave a sort of military rhythm to the poetry. But in case of Middle English period, we have a predominance of meter and rhyme and these things. So there is, you can say, an infusion of French elements, not just in language but also in literature of the times. It is very important to remember that while on one hand people were getting more educated, more culturally sound, at the same time they were going away from that free-minded culture which they enjoyed in the Old English period. So interestingly, this was also an age which is known as the Dark Ages. Why is this age called the Dark Age, where we see so much of French influence coming in, because French were supposed to be very liberal people? That is because this was an age where feudalism started. This was an age where you had this central government's concept. Earlier, you had these individual tribes, their heads, a loose connection, political connection between these tribes. But now we have a central government, under him the feudal system, where a hierarchy, a social ladder is maintained, and you are always under, you can say, the surveillance of the state. And when the state makes this gesture of surveillance, when the state notices you all the time, how is the state doing that? It's doing through religion. Okay, because religion is a very important aspect of social life, and religion became a stronghold of power. You can say a way in which power was propagated. Church was more important than the king in some places or in some cases. This is why we also see a rise of religious drama, or rather the rise of drama in England was because of these religious dramas. Earlier, when there was political disturbance and inter-tribe wars, life was not a stable one, and therefore people didn't have the chance to actually develop dramatic performances. So people used to have a sort of expression through poetry, but not through drama. During the medieval period, when political life was stabilized, then there was an emergence of drama. Where? In the courtyards of the churches. Okay, so church started to propagate drama. And why did church do that? To advertise itself. And what kind of advertisement? What kind of drama was it? We had 3 types of drama or plays written during the medieval period. First, the mystery plays. Second, the miracle plays. And third, the morality plays. Mystery plays were those which were written based on the stories from the Bible. Miracle plays were those which were written based on the lives of the saints. Why miracle play? Because in order to become a saint, you need to perform a miracle. Okay, so any play based on the life of a saint is a miracle play. What are morality plays? Morality plays are those where a moral teaching is given. So you see how the church used the mode of drama to teach people the sense of moral value or their version of morality. Okay, because morality has different versions depending on perspectives, depending on your gender, depending on a lot of things. So the church used these medium for its own end. Why mystery plays were called so? Because mystery plays were, unlike miracle plays were performed mostly in church courtyards. Mystery plays were often performed outside, and it was like a theater on wheels. And there used to be the stage set up where people used to perform, and they used to perform one particular scene. And then another stage was prepared, maybe a little far off, where the next scene would be enacted repeatedly, the same scene. The idea was people would travel from one place to another place in a sequence and watch the scenes. Usually this happened during a pilgrimage. People will be going towards a destination, a fixed destination, and while going they will be viewing these scenes and going. And when these stages were set up, then a special knowledge was needed to build these structures. And often trade guilds who sponsored these stages, these trade guilds could be a guild or association of plumbers, could be an association of weavers, association of tailors, trade people, they used to keep this a secret. They didn't tell everybody how they built that stage. Okay. And they used to perform things like Noah's flood, the journey of Moses, events from the Bible. And that is why this was a mystery, this whole thing, how the stage was set up and things. And this was called a mystery play. Okay, so now I hope you won't confuse between miracle plays and mystery plays. Mystery plays, always remember, trade guilds, that mysterious stage setup, and stories from the Bible. And miracle, because a saint performs miracle, therefore life of a saint is shown in a miracle play. In morality plays, usually the characters are taken from abstract qualities or abstract things like death, goodness, peace, sin, greed, 5 senses. So these are the characters that are on stage. So these are not real characters. Even when you see in a play like Everyman, a man is standing on stage. So you might say that, ma'am, this is a man standing on stage. So how can you say it's unreal or it's abstract? That man is an abstract thing because he represents all men. He is every man. Okay, so being every man, he is not one man, and therefore he is not human in that way, he is abstract. So these are the allegorical characters which abound the stage during the medieval period. And then we have this remarkable influence of Chaucer, who kind of brings in some element of originality despite the strong French influence on him. And his best work is, of course, the Canterbury Tales, because there he gives us the flavor of England. Although he uses many things that he gets from his French education, we see England in a very fine manner in Chaucer's writing. So in the age of Chaucer, other significant authors that we come across are Langland, Wycliffe, Mandeville and Gower. So these are the four people who, along with Chaucer, are very important so far as the medieval age is concerned, or the Middle Ages is concerned. So I remember I had discussed all these things in my disrupted life where I could not complete what I started with or what I planned to. But these are the things I had talked about, and with this knowledge we can go on to the Renaissance next week, and I'm sure we will somehow have a very interactive session. So I really am very sorry about what had happened, and I hope this makeup class would be of some use to you. My suggestion is, if you have any history of literature book, why don't you just go through that a little bit and we can begin our discussion in our next live class. So thank you all for watching this video, and once again I'm so very sorry about today's class. Bye bye.